What's going on, guys? Sensible Prepper Live. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty getting on, but we are here and we are ready to talk about something that the one thing that happens. It just seems that you get into a state of normal and you kind of feel like, oh, things are going to get better or things aren't going to happen, and then something happens. And so today we're going to talk about something I really hadn't planned on until just recently, and that is 10 things that you need to know about martial law. Now, you know, uh, one of the problems right now, and really what spurred this, is the Tesla attack. A lot of the leftist groups are starting to, uh, you know, go against dealerships, against individual owners, and what we're finding is there is an organized attack toward Tesla and other more right-leaning type groups or more conservative ideals. And not only is it just these organized groups, which are some kind of a dark, shadowy group. We saw it with Antifa. We saw it with Black Lives Matter. A lot of money that's coming in to organize these groups. But we're also seeing a lot of government officials coming out and saying, we need to fight. We need to do this. We need to. And it's very disconcerting because when you start getting the support of the actual legislators and representatives, it's something that we really need to consider because it becomes more justified. So also we have the threat of the cartels. There's been a lot going on against, getting the immigrants back across the borders, getting them to their home countries. And so there's this cartel activity and there's just some protest against that as well. And, there's other things. So we're going to talk about 10 things that you need to know, that you need to consider when it comes to martial law. Now, first off, governments are going to be slow to enact martial law. It causes panic, it causes disruption and fear. And so people really martial law is one of those words that you kind of martial law. But the upside to martial law is that it restores order. And if things get just totally out of hand, which honestly martial law should have been implemented in some of the protest that we had a few years ago in 2020 in 2021 with a lot of the political protests that were going on. And so martial law has its place. It's when local law enforcement just can't restore order. And so they have to do something to get order because really it's just some bad actors that are doing things. The problem with the bad actors doing things is, what are you identified as? And there can be some misconceptions, and then it kind of spills over to, getting a tight grip on things. And it can cause a lot of fear and a lot of panic. And it can actually escalate a lot of the issues that it's trying to solve. So, and which means that the more control, the more they can kind of clamp down on the situation. But that means it affects everyday citizens. Another thing about martial law typically is it will start in cities and then it starts to move out. And it's just according to what's going on. Sometimes the protesters will move to a smaller city and then it gets out into the countryside. We saw that with some of the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter movements. They were threatening and actually went into some of the smaller towns, organized as they could be. I think the one thing right now that we may have a little difference in is with our current situation, as far as for everyday people that aren't really politically motivated, is we have a little bit more of a safety net than we have before. It's just my opinion. So, what are some things to do? And we're going to look at 10 different things to consider if we have to face that kind of end. One of the things that I remember when they had the bomber up in the Boston Marathon situation is that there became a search for the second bomber. And, they kind of shut down Boston and they were going door to door. It was pretty much martial law in the city. And there was a lot of, of panic, and this guy's running around that obviously had planted this bomb and they were trying to find him. And, we don't really see a lot of that going on, but also at Katrina, when Katrina hit, And one of the sad things is they went specifically after firearms and door to door searches. And there was a lot that happened. One of the things, though, that came out of that was good is a lot of states have enacted laws to where if you declare martial law, you can't take away people's right to defend themselves. So out of that came some good things, but it still is ingrained in people's minds. And honestly, at the time, not necessarily the firearm confiscation, but a lot of the things that were enacted are important. Now, what are some things that are going to happen during martial law? First off, there's going to be a strong presence of law enforcement, military. It may be National Guard, and of course, the military will or the police will kind of act hand in hand with your with whatever forces that are enacting this martial law. It's curfews. So after a certain time, you can't be out. You're going to be in your house, I guess, really towards sundown. And then, people will kind of have some normal time, hopefully, to be able to conduct business, because we definitely have to continue to keep the economy going. But the problem is that it limits the economy. We have a lot of companies that have second and third shifts, and they have to produce goods and services that we need. And so when you have curfews, unless you're allowed as an employee and you have certain passes to be able to go, it definitely will affect the economy. Another thing that happens a lot of times during martial law, because of the hurting the economy, is rationing. And a lot of times people, especially food production, transportation, those kind of things, there's less. And so the food is being rationed out. And so you've got to adapt to that. One thing in certain countries, a lot of times they'll give you a certain amount that you can purchase, and that's all you can purchase. And so it really limits, again, by rationing what our supplies are. And freedom of movement, which is with curfews, and a lot of times roadblocks are set up and different things like that. And you have to have reasons to go to certain places. And then the end all is possible confiscation. And, we did a video a while back about how FEMA has the ability to confiscate. And these are the laws that were passed a number of years ago. And they can go in and take certain items from you if they're needed for the whole. And that includes food and water. It includes communications. It includes firearms. It includes a number of different items that may be needed for the powers that are enforcing the law. And so that is one thing to consider. And we're actually going to talk about that. So before we get started into it too deep, we want to talk, kind of promote, which we love, Exotac. You need to have a fire kit, guys. It is primal. This is what gives you light, gives you heat, cooks your food, boils your water, and it can keep predators at bay, and it just builds morale. And Exotac makes some of the best fire starters out there. I mean, they're great quality, and they're made down in Winder, Georgia. I've been a big fan of Exotac for years, and building a fire kit, whether it's ferrocerium rods or lifeboat matches or different type lighters, all fire tinder, all kind of things. And you get 20% off using Such 20 with the link down below in the description. So, and also speaking of martial law, this is the book, the Modern Survival Manual for the Coming Economic Collapse. And this was actually written about actual events that happened in Argentina back in 2001, which relate very well to what we're going to be talking about. This is one book that, and I have a library of books, and they're great, but this is the one book that I highly recommend almost on every live. And we have a link for this, Amazon link down below in the description. And I know a lot of you guys have bought this because we see it, but this is a great book. And Fowl, who wrote the book, is an expert in survival and in getting through these type situations. And we have suchgear.com. You want to check that out. We have some new patches. I have to have my moment of, just obscene capitalism, but patches, and we have hats, and we have a lot of other stuff over there. And we do deals. We have newsletters. We do giveaways as well. In fact, we just gave away the Academy bug out bag that we just put together, and that was the giveaway. And so that ended. So we're having a new giveaway coming up. So make sure you run over and check out Suits Gear. Okay, got all that going. All right, what is it that you do immediately? Well, first thing you do is to make sure that there's no signs of things that would attract attention around your house. If you have things laid up, things that might be desirable for a situation, you may have some prepping items around. You want to just make sure that your house is secure and that you have items that make you more discreet. Things like firearms, making sure they're put away. Go through and lock all your doors, lock your windows, make sure your home is secure. If you have cars in the driveway, you just want to, just to kind of keep things, just if you can move them or if you can put them in a garage, just do that. And it kind of keeps things really clean and neat out front. And it just makes you less of a target. And that's what you want to do just immediately. Anything that may be prepping that draws attention to you, get rid of it, clean it up, make sure that that's, the way it is. And it just gives you a little more, where you're a little more anonymous. And that's really what you want to do. So anything that's going to attract attention, you want to go ahead and kind of right away, go ahead and get that set aside and get yourself in good shape. Number two is to hide your valuables and to get into a little more of firearms, ammunition. Again, one thing that happened in Katrina and can happen still, especially in more liberal areas, is that your firearms could be confiscated. And a lot of times those weren't even returned when it came to Katrina. But being able to protect yourself and defend yourself can be vital, not because of martial law, but because of looters and people that are looking for things. And for that matter, law enforcement coming in, you have a stash of firearms and ammunition. Not only will they take that, but it puts you under the scrutiny of the powers that be. And so you want to make sure you kind of take those things and put them away, get them locked up, get them secured, hide them if you have to. Items that could be contraband, make sure you go ahead and get those. The one thing you're going to know is there, and we're going to get into this in a minute, door-to-door searches are possible and have happened. So you want to make sure that a lot of those items that could be confiscated, that are put away and hidden. They're not going to go through every inch of your house, hopefully, because they'll be just going and picking up things. It's really low-hanging fruit. If there's something you have laying out, that could be a possibility to have them check that. And so you want to make sure that you keep food. If you have excess food, secure it. One thing, too, is to possibly have a remote location. Divide your preps. We have what we call a cache, and it's a storage unit, and me and a buddy have it, and we have essential items that are put away there in case something's compromised at home. And so during a martial law situation, you could possibly, you have some freedom during the day to be able to drive around and conduct whatever affairs you have. And that would be a place that you could have some things put away that are not necessarily just at your home. And two, it's not that they're necessarily going to go door to door at storage units. And so you can have some things set aside. Or even if you have friends that have places that are more secluded that you can put things. So make sure that you take those valuables you need, your assets for survival that could be compromised, and you want to make sure that you either spread those out, hide them, and just secure them. Okay, now this is one that honestly I've never really thought too much about in the past. The one thing we have is our phones, our computers, different data on our computers. According to the purpose of the martial law, and that expands, is to make sure that you're being discreet. You have a blackout. Now, I can message and call and text, but make sure if there's something that may be frowned upon, something that may draw attention, what we're seeing in England right now with them posting things online. And then having visits by the police. Germany's the same thing, anything about immigration. And so people are being put in jail because of something that they put on Facebook or they put online. So we know that they're monitoring that already. Not only big tech, but also governments. They check those things. It's part of looking and heading off problems, but it could put you on a list. So make sure that you're keeping that on the down low. A prime example, let's say that they're rationing food, they're rationing things, and you text a friend of yours or a family friend, and you say, "Hey, y'all come over. We've got some beef, and we've got some stuff," and and that can be monitored. So make sure that you keep that in mind when you think you're sending a private text, but it could be picked up. Also on your computer, same thing with emails, things like that. If you have on your computer a list of the items you have as far as being a prepper, and you might want to take those, download them, and move them to another location and get them off your computer. Yes, they can get in your computer and they can find all that, but don't give them a reason to expand the search. And I think that's one thing that if you kind of keep on the down low, you just don't draw a lot of attention. One thing that's a lot of people have Alexa in their homes, and they're saying things, and those things can be picked up. And so, and you may be just thinking this is plain, this is not a problem. Nobody's really looking for this, but you start talking about it to your wife and you go, "Oh yeah, we need to secure that food. Oh, I've got to get my guns put away." You have Alexa running, those things can be picked up. So you want to make sure that you're discreet. One thing about the book 1984 was that they had a TV in there and they had cameras on everything you did. Today, and that was written back in the 50s or 40s. This is like it's on steroids. They can know everything you're doing. Even your camera, while the phone shut off, it can actually be working. So just make sure that you're cognizant of electronic devices, the information that can be passed, what you were saying, how it can be construed, and just be careful. Uh, Honestly, even today, that is something that data can be collected. And so you could possibly already be on that list. But in a martial law situation, that's going to be ramped up. And they're going to be monitoring things so they can head off potential problems. But you don't want to be caught in the net, because the net just picks it up. And you don't want to be one of those people that's caught in the net. So blackout is extremely important. Keeping your words and making sure that if nothing else, you go into a code phase like Wind Talker, and then you come up with some kind of system. But be careful. And guys, let me just say this. I'm not saying that those who, and you could take this nefariously and use this, but these are items that really for the everyday citizen that wants to be law abiding, but you don't want to come under the radar. Okay, we're going to door-to-door searches. And after this, we're going to go to some questions. So if you have questions, you can leave them at any time. And Sarah Mac's over on the computer, and she's monitoring that. And when we take a little short break, and we're going to do that after, this is item 4. So we have door-to-door searches. Again, taking cues from what happened at Katrina. And really, they were just looking for firearms. The mayor there had just declared martial law and that all firearms needed to be confiscated. A lot of it had to do with some bad actors that were out there doing things that were bad. Unfortunately, average citizens that were just there to defend themselves. I'll never forget this elderly lady who had a revolver, and they came in and they actually knocked her down, and I think they hit her and they took the revolver. And that is the one thing to know is that military and law enforcement, they're just guys. They're average men and women that just are doing what they're doing, and they're under orders a lot of times. They're not bad people necessarily. They're just out there doing whatever they're instructed to do. And so you can't really look at them in a sense, but yet they can do things that are against our rights and one of the problems is when we're in martial law, your rights are very limited. And so you want to make sure again that you kind of stay on the down low. So door-to-door searches, what is it that when they come into your house, if they come into your house, that they're going to be searching for? Typically firearms could be on the list. It could be excessive food. They could say, well, this person's a hoarder, and really, we have these shelters down here. We need that food. You have more than you need. You can get your food when you need it, but we're going to take this so we can ration this out. So one of the things that's really kind of disheartening is as a prepper, you're preparing, you've got food set back, you've got water, you've done all this stuff with your hard-earned money for it to be taken away from you, and then you're in line to get a small part of that. If it comes down to that, a lot of times, they ration the food. So, you go into stores, you're limited to what you can buy. And so having those needed supplies, are really a lifesaver. One of the things that's happened down in Venezuela, not necessarily as much now, but before, is they had extensive farms and they were growing, but they came in and shut a lot of those down. And the people on average lost 20 pounds. And that they just weren't getting the food. And a lot of times the meat was already spoiled. They were still eating it because they had nothing to eat. And so honestly, having a food source put back is important. And you don't want to have that compromised. You don't want to have it confiscated. So you want to be smart about what you have. If you walk into your house, and you can do it right now, you walk into your house and say, what is it that is a sign that I have excess, that I have food stored back, that I'm a prepper, that I have water put back, or things like that. And so you want to kind of look through and see, especially when you have that immediate martial law is enacted and they're starting to organize, and then you want to make sure that you're in good shape, because again, FEMA does have some law that they can come in and take certain things. And what are those things? Electronics is one thing, things again that they can use. So they're going to be looking for that if they go door to door and just seeing what. Now, sometimes it can be door to door to find, bad actors, people that are doing things, and they wouldn't necessarily be messing with you. But here's the thing for me, as far as when it comes to martial law, is I want to make sure that the things that could identify me as whatever is that it's as minimal as possible. So if they do come in, you go, okay, whatever. And then, you have your stuff secured. You can kind of go back to the 1930s and 40s in Europe when the Jews were being picked up by the Nazis. And a lot of people hid them. And when they were caught, they got in trouble. And that's one of the things too, is you want to keep yourself out of trouble. Okay, let's go to a few questions, and then we'll get back to the list.
Prepper 101 says, my question today is marriage and martial law. Is there much of a difference?
That's a good point. And what's yours is hers, and what's hers is hers, right? But no, just kidding. But yeah.
Nick Howard says, howdy from Florida. Watched a 10-year-old video of you covering a Glock 42 yesterday. You've aged like a fine vintage truck. Is the 42 still a decent carry option?
Yeah. And two, I love it. I love the size. It's tiny. And yet, you've got limited round capacity. But one thing that I like to do is add an extended base pad to it to give it a little more round capacity. But, guys carry 5-shot revolvers all the time for self-defense. And if we're not careful sometimes, and I like to have more than I need, but if we're not careful, sometimes we can discount the single stacks, we can discount the revolver for limited round capacity. But, if I have a small revolver in my pocket, it's very comforting. Having a 42, you have it's 380, but you have those, you can have a couple of extra rounds in there to kind of bring it up. Keep one in the chamber. I believe it's 6 rounds in the 42, and then you can maybe get a 2+ base plate. That gives you a decent, that's 9 rounds. And so that's a decent base, and it's very small.
Ron McPeak says, what is the make of that tan bag on the wall over your right shoulder with the black trim, and where can I buy one?
That is the Roaring Fire Pack Mule. And it is awesome. And in fact, I think Battle Box, there was one in the Battle Box recently. So highly recommended. I know the guys over at Roaring Fire. One of my best buddies works for them. And lifetime warranties, free shipping. And so it's roaringfiregear.com. Check it out. And I think if you use RF10, you get 10% off.
Hungry Raven says, question, how should one prepare for children not knowing their future shoe size, cup size for girls, etc.? Do I start my own Macy's or barter for what's needed when it's needed?
That's a tough one because we had three kids. We have three kids, and when they were growing up, they outgrew their clothes very fast. And one of those is going to be hand me downs kind of thing situation. If you're really trying to kind of get some things ahead, you can go to the Goodwill, you can go to Miracle Hill, different Salvation Army, some of those thrift stores, and pick up some items that it'll be low cost. So if you're really wanting to do that, you can. I think one thing that happens in a situation is that you will have more hand-me-downs. You'll have neighbors and family and friends that'll hand that down, and so that could be a possible fix as well. One thing to always remember is that no matter what happens, that there will be a new normal. There will be some trading. There will be markets that open up. There will be bartering. There will be those things. It's always been that way. It may be less than what you had before. It may be tougher than you had before. But that's one of the things about prepping is we prep. We can't prep for everything. But what we do is we prep to a point that we can make better decisions, and it gives us time. That's the big thing. So if you really kind of are concerned about it and you want to do something, I would highly recommend going down to Goodwill, buying a few things, putting them away, and saying, okay, this is, and it's a low expense. But I really think that people will start to trade and barter for clothes, which happens already. So let's go to one more and we'll get back to it.
Mark Rogers says, question. I have heard your constitutional rights are still in effect during martial law. What do you think?
It's according. Sometimes it's limited, just like it happened in Katrina. Your right for self-defense went out the window, and a lot of firearms were confiscated, a lot of abuse, and that is one of our basic rights. Also, the right for free speech. What happens in martial law sometimes is a lot of that shut down. They're not going to allow gatherings. They're not going to allow those things. So I just think it's limited. I think you may have some, and then unwarranted search and seizures. They can do that. They can suspend a lot of the Constitution. So while in essence your constitutional rights are still there, they can be limited, and that's because it becomes on a grand scale. So, but as far as legal precedent and what we've seen for our constitutional rights is that there are abuses that happen that they know full well. This is in non-martial law time. They've known full well, and they go ahead and enact it because they know it's going to be thrown into the courts, and it takes forever for that to pan out. Okay, but that is a good question. All right, we're going to the next one. Okay, this is early warning signs. And what I mean by that is if things start to happen, you need to have some way to know if you have law enforcement or military coming to your house. National Guard's going to show up. Having cameras, having just not a knock on the door, having security measures around, not something that's going to hurt someone, but even having tripwire that has alarms. One thing we did was Fifth Ops, which does the coolest tripwires, and they're set by primers and different things to where they'll go off and they'll give you an early warning sign. I would recommend that anyway, especially whether power's on or not. In a martial law situation, hopefully power would be still power would still be on, but having ways to be able to dictate or detect when people are coming around. One thing that would happen too is if you start rationing and you start doing some of these things and items become scarce, you are going to have people that are going to be out there trying to steal things, whether martial law is going on or not. And so to me, having some security around your place, and again, those early warning signs or systems. One of the things we have is a driveway alarm. You come in our driveway, we know it immediately. The dogs know where it's coming from, and it's an instant warning. Well before they get to our house, before our security cameras and alarms and things start to activate. If that happens, you've got seconds. If something you can kind of do before, of course, having dogs, that kind of thing as well. So early warning signs are going to be important. But to me, one of the coolest that you can put anywhere is a trip alarm. And again, it's Fifth Ops, FITHOPS. And I believe they give a discount. I have a video that you can check out. It's a really cool system for off-the-grid security. Okay, keeping under the radar. Don't make yourself a target. And one of the things about us Americans is that we like to say, this is my right. I'm going to say what I say. I'm all about that. I'm all about saying what you have to say. But when you are under scrutiny, when things are a little bit off kilter and you don't want to end up in jail, you don't want to end up in some kind of camp, you want to keep it as normal as possible, just low profile. Don't do things that are stupid. Just live life and get through it. Typically, sooner or later, martial law is going to pass. It's just according to the situation. So stay on the down low. Just kind of keep yourself from being attracted. Prey or predator, they always, they come out of nowhere, or the prey tends to hide, tends to just kind of keep, because they know the danger of being out there, being too bold. So it's better to kind of step back, let things kind of pan out, and then hopefully it'll be a new normal. And when we talk about martial law, guys, it should be a limited thing if it is, but it doesn't mean that it will. Info gathering. Now, this is something that's important to know what's going on, to be abreast of the things that are happening in your community, in your city. Obviously cities are going to be the first to kind of have some, where they come in, because that's where a lot of the big protests, because there's just more people and it's a bigger splash. Those can feather out the protest into smaller towns or cities and then go down and down the chain. Possibly with martial law, you're only going to see it in the cities, in the major cities. That may be where they want to concentrate. So a lot of us in more rural areas are going to be less affected, but you still need to be aware. And that's one thing, is to stay informed with local news. Listen to what your neighbors are saying. When you're out and about, keep an ear out, eavesdrop, listen for different reports. One thing that I love that Dave over at Southern Prepper One, he's a friend of mine. He lives not too far from me. And he does this boots on the ground, and he has people to get in touch with him about things that are going on all over the country. Know what's going on, know what's happening in your area. If things are starting to happen, or if neighborhoods or, they start searches, it'll get you more prepared to be ready for it. And it won't be a surprise. It won't be just a knock on the door and you're like, what? And then there they are. So having some, ears to the ground, listening, knowing what's going on in your community. The one thing about it with news, local news, it can be compromised. There can be a lot of misinformation to direct an agenda. And so don't always trust what you're hearing. Be thoughtful. In fact, I read this a while back. It said, only trust in God and yourself. And honestly, don't trust yourself. So make sure that you're doing the right things and that you are giving that low profile. So when you're listening to things, you can kind of gather information and know what's going on around you. It's one of the things that really word spread like wildfire. And that's the thing. Word will spread like wildfire. People want to talk. They want to tell you what's going on. You want to make sure, though, that it's credible as much as you can. But knowing and being forewarned is going to be really vital. And knowing what kind of situations are going on. It could be, hey, they're doing this. There's a roadblock up here. They're doing this. This is going on. It just allows you to make a better plan, to stay out of trouble, and to make sure that you and your family are safe. And that's really what this is all about. Number 8 is bartering. Now, when you start to ration things, and when you have just certain amounts, back during World War II, they rationed gas, they rationed tires, they rationed food, and they encouraged people to have victory gardens. First off is the barter is you've got guns and ammo. Now, one of the things that happen, and these are things that you learn from actual events, is that there were a lot of people in Argentina that were saving up ammo because they knew they could barter it. And then the national government passed a law that you couldn't sell, trade, or barter ammunition without a license. One of the things that you don't always foresee is what can happen. So it's best to have not all your eggs in one basket. Firearms and ammunition are going to be premium, but so is coffee, so is liquor, alcohol, cigarettes, those kind of things people are going to want. And if you ration it, there are some people that are going to be like, look, you know, I have a ration of cigarettes, but my habit's a lot bigger than this. Their habit's not as much, so maybe they can trade. I'm not a cigarette smoker, but if you want, nicotine is a very addictive substance, and it's something that you can capitalize on if you think about it. So for me, I always think about the vices as far as what you can barter and trade. One thing too is, and this is something I just happened to come across a while back, if you have solar power, whether it's a solar power generator, like we have the EcoFlow, we love it. It's just an incredible system. Or even battery backups, different things, you can barter for solar power if the grid is down. And what I mean by that is, let's say that I still have cell service, but my phone, I don't have power. And so I can go to a guy that maybe he has solar panels on his house. Maybe he has a solar generator. Maybe he has some solar options, and maybe go charge up my electronic devices, not only your phone, but even a radio or your laptop or things like that, where you can charge up items. Maybe it's flashlights. That's one thing that a lot of people, with rechargeable batteries in their lights, anything that has rechargeable batteries, maybe it's your tools. And you're like, I don't really have enough power with this cordless drill or this saw, so I can take it and I can barter. And so then if you have solar power, it's a great idea to be able to barter your power. And it gives people something that they need, and then hopefully they may have something that you need. And that's really where bartering comes in. Of course, we talk about precious metals. I'm big about that. And, it's according to what the economy is doing. But back in 2008, there were a number of stores that had signs in the window saying, "We take silver as trade." And so, when the economy starts to slip, and under martial law, it will. So when the economy starts to slip and there's issues because it disrupts everything, then you have some barter items. You could possibly can have some wealth, protect your wealth with precious metals, and be able to barter with that as well. But whatever, even if you have a garden, let's say you have a victory garden of some sort, you like the garden, those fresh vegetables and things. If you have excess, you can trade those. Let's say you have chickens and you want to trade, you can barter eggs. That might have been a really good idea over the past year or so when egg prices went through the roof. And so a lot of things to consider when it comes to bartering. I might be able to barter my services. Somebody needs something fixed or repaired. I go, and then they have some food for me or something that I could use, and having some way to be able to barter that, which goes to our next, is adapting to a new economy. First off is that if you have skills that are needed, and it could be a repair skills, it could be, whatever, security, it can be a number of different things. You may have different abilities that you can use. We've talked about this in the past in some other videos where, having some skills, develop skills if you don't have them, that are going to be useful in a grid down or some kind of SHTF situation. Getting those skills together. Maybe it's woodworking. Maybe it's metalworking. Maybe it's you have a torch and you know how to weld. You can really be able to use that. Maybe it's plumbing. There's a lot of different things that maybe it's you're into firearms and you can instruct people on how to use them. And again, it's according to how the martial law pans out. There's a lot of variables. So to me, making sure that I have all my variables covered as much as possible, even those that I might not need that could turn into something that could be very valuable. So adapt. Another thing too is to learn to ration what you have. You may have a lot of food stored back. Don't just go, well, we got food stored back, so we just eat like we've always eaten. No, ration your food. Be careful with it. It's not always going to last forever. Anything you have. And so ration it out now. And plus, it gives you the ability to help others if you need to. helping others. One of the things that's happened in the prepping community a lot of times is we get selfish, and it's like, I prepped, I did all this, it's mine, and you're not going to take it. You should have prepped. When human nature really kicks in, you've got to go, you know what? I need to help people, because that's really what makes life worth it. So always think about, don't be too selfish with your preps. Think about possibly using that to help other people, because that's really what makes us human. Okay, then there is psychological. Now, obviously, we enact, just like with COVID, when COVID hit and had the lockdowns, there was a lot of psychological fear. There was panic. There were a lot of things that were circling around that. You have a martial law situation. You have protests going on. You have disruption. You have people out of control. It can cause a lot of fear. It can cause panic. It can make people worry, get depressed. And so you need to really guard yourself psychologically. I will say the first thing you need to do is to make sure you have a good Bible, and make sure that you're feeding yourself with very positive and hopeful information. But another thing too is having a good library. That's one thing that I've done, especially in an electronic age. These things can be shut down. They can be closed out. This gives me a lot of information, and I have a whole reference library. I can read novels. I can do whatever. But two, with time down, you can check those things out as well, and to be able to increase your mind, your mental. But don't fear. And again, don't necessarily trust everything you hear. Keep a rational head. When things seem to be really irrational and things are like, what the heck? Question it, because sometimes I know that during the 2020 election and or the not the 2020, yeah, when they had the election and Joe Biden came in, and there was a lot of with January 6th and a lot of the stuff that went on, people had rumors that were just absolutely crazy. And they would talk about this and oh, they're going to do this. Oh, they're going to do that. And I finally looked at it one day. I said, this is causing me more issues than not, because a lot of this stuff is so far-fetched, and it was just bogus. It was misinformation, actually coming from the right. And you've got to be careful to stay in the middle. Be constitutional, do the right thing, be conservative, but there are extremes on both sides. I think the Democrats have been finding that out recently, is just the radical left, and people will identify those that are Democrat or a little on that side to be extreme. Same thing with the right. If you're not careful, you're going to get this extreme right, and you're going to get identified by that. So be rational and think things through. And when you hear things, consider both sides. It's very important to stay balanced. And in today's world, it's very difficult. The problem is we have these algorithms that push us to a certain mindset. And if you're not careful, you become that mindset. So be rational, be wise, give yourself some leeway and think, is this really what I need to be thinking about? It's just like I've said with the prepping community years ago, 2008, when I first started, and around that time to 2010, there were people that on YouTube that were saying, if you haven't stored up your food already, it's too late. And recommending that people run out and take their credit cards and run them up to the max to buy all this prepping supplies. I mean, right now, where are they? They're in debt up to their eyeballs, and nothing happened necessarily. COVID, yes, but really, it's very. You just got to be careful, and you got to guard your mind. And again, that's where I think having a spiritual connection will help. So take solace and think about things and think them through. And two, watching with the psychological side is with when you see stuff into cities, when you see it start to move into to cities, but smaller cities, and then into towns, prepare yourself. Make sure that you're in good shape. One thing that Southern Prepper One says is, don't be scared, be prepared. these are things that, as far as preppers go, we do a lot of this, but these are specifics to lean us into a better outcome if some kind of martial law is enacted. Okay, so 10 things. I did another video about things that FEMA can confiscate. Go to the Sensible Prepper page, just look under the search, the magnifying glass, and you can put FEMA in there, and it will give you a lot of information. I find it funny that YouTube demonetized that one, but it's definitely one that's very pertinent, and it gives you some background in what they can and can't do. And sometimes they can do it and they don't, and sometimes they shouldn't do it and they do. So you got to be both ways. Okay, let's go to a few more questions and see what we have, because you guys always have some good questions.
Semper Gumby Channel asks,
Oh, hey, Ben.
purchasing land is a great investment. I purchased some here in Tennessee, building my off-grid cabin. What size of acreage would be great for a person?
You can do a lot with a small piece of property. I mean, for an acre, there's a lot that you can do. I mean, to me personally, I think a 10-acre plot is just that good, manageable size. Of course, if you can do bigger, it's even better. And even for that matter, 5 acres, it's according to what you're wanting to do. But even on an acre, you can plant a lot of food. And two, one thing that, to consider is sometimes, you have your house and then you have your yard and then you have your little garden plot. Don't feel locked in to that garden plot. If you need to, take the whole yard, just have that ability. I think when you start to get more acreage, it just gives you more options. And so obviously the more you have, the better you're going to be. But on the other hand, there is a lot that needs to be managed when you have property. And it's one thing that we deal with is property management with underbrush and all the things, cutting trees. Trees, my gosh, they grow so fast, and we're always having to have trees cut down or cut down stuff. And so there's always a lot that goes into it. So you can have buffer zones with forest around it, which really, to me, when you have more property, that's what it gives you. It gives you more privacy. But again, you can do a lot with 1 acre. And for a family, you get in there and start to really, it's funny, the Dutch farmers, they're some of the most efficient farmers in the world, and they produce a lot of food for their area. And so just being smart and doing it right and that can take you a long way. But if you're like me, you need as many acres as you can.
Vita says, what do you do regularly to keep yourself in good physical and mental condition? Love the channel.
Thank you. Martial arts is a big part of what we do. Been doing that for years and years. And it not only helps us physically, but it also helps us mentally. One of the things about specifically martial arts is that it's a lot of thinking. It's a lot of mental. It's a lot of memorization. It's a lot of that. And then just the physical part of it. And then the self-defense realm. One thing I highly recommend is going and getting some kind of self-defense training. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a firearm. It can be just hands-on. And for women especially, there's a lot of classes out there that are going to give you some advantages. But definitely working out. But honestly, just walking, taking walks, good sturdy walks are very healthy. And so, but remain active. A lot of us, and I'm included, I can be in this. I do a lot on the computer. I'm doing a lot of editing. I'm doing a lot of stuff sitting down. So it's vital for me to be active and continue to be active. We get settled where we are. So, again, sports, pickleball is such a big deal right now. And that's something, get involved in it. Get involved in tennis, going out and playing golf, just enjoying life, but be active. Taking walks downtown, do things that just the normal things, just stay active. But for me, I would highly recommend anyone to get involved in martial arts. You don't have to go try to be a black belt, but it's sure just starting out gives you a lot of skill that's going to be needed.
The Joshua says, as an American nomad, what's the best region to be in if martial law goes in effect?
Well, you want to make sure it's someplace that has some natural resources that you can live. If obviously if everything goes to heck, the less population, the better. But the problem is like in, let's say, certain parts of the Midwest or the Southwest, there's desert, it's going to be more difficult to survive in those areas. To me, going into areas like Idaho and Montana, which a lot of people have bought properties there and have gone there, is a great place where it's a good political climate, and yet the people there are still hardworking and just good, decent people. But avoid, one of the things to me to avoid is a state that has a major city. If you're looking to do that, a state that doesn't have the city controlling the entire state, like Illinois, like, Minnesota, those places, you've got Minneapolis that controls the whole city. You've got Chicago that controls the whole county. You got New York, has a big state with a lot of conservatives in upstate New York, but it's controlled. So, you want to get out of those. You don't want to choose those kind of areas. One of the things about South Carolina is that we have 3 kind of equally set up cities, and a lot of people are moving here. Tennessee, even though Tennessee has some bigger cities, Chattanooga and Knoxville and Memphis and Nashville, they are very conservative across. So, you have to just look, really, I would avoid cities and states with cities, and look for places that have good natural resources that's not scarce, which you're going to have a little less population.
DZ Wren asks, where can I find information on what to go into a victory garden?
Yeah, that's a good one. One thing about it is according to the size of the garden, a lot of times, to me, and I encourage people to definitely have a garden. What it does is it may not produce enough food for you to live on, for you and your family, but it does give you good, fresh vegetables, and it supplements what you have. If you can have a bigger garden, then great. But the one thing about the Victory Garden was just giving you like tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, corn. You need a lot more property. Potatoes is a great one. And the one thing you can do is actually grow potatoes and we've done it in buckets, in trash cans, fill them with dirt, and then you dig them out, and they've got all these potatoes in there. Peppers are great. A source of vitamin C. One thing we like to grow is okra, and you may be like, well, okra, but we love okra. Brussels sprouts. I mean, there's a lot of things, and it's according to your area what grows well, and that's another thing you need to watch. But tomatoes seem to be one thing that a lot of people do because tomatoes are fairly easy to grow. One situation, though, and it's something to really consider if you've never gardened before, or if you're in a new area in your gardening, is there are different threats. There are different insects. There's blight. There's different kind of things that can happen. And we have noticed that. We went from tilling the ground and growing vegetables. That's one way. If you go to raised beds, it changes things. So we had a lot of issues with raised beds that we didn't have when we were just growing vegetables right out of the ground. The one thing that happened, though, is we had deer come in and destroy our garden, and rats and bunnies and everything else. And so the one thing that we have now that protects it is we have a fence around it, and we have raised beds, and we're able to maintain more security. But it seems like that they're not as hardy. A lot of times you're bringing in soil to fill in those raised beds. It may not be local. It may not have the nutrients that, like in our area in South Carolina, there are certain things that just grow really well. But if you're getting dirt from some other place and you're bringing it in, you got to be careful. And a lot of times you have people, especially on YouTube, and they're talking about, oh, this is the boss soil. You need this, you need that. And you do that, but it's not conducive to your climate. So it takes a lot, and you got to be, one thing we had out of nowhere were hornworms in our tomatoes. We'd never had that problem before. And all of a sudden, so we had to take steps. One thing I would recommend with a garden is have a bird feeder and have it out just a little bit. Those birds will come and eat the insects out of your garden. And that's one thing we found out, that it was really a beautiful benefit. Plus we have beautiful birds out there. And it's a growing process, excuse the pun, but when it comes to gardening, there is a lot to learn and to get yourself to have a successful garden. I know I kind of expanded that way past what you asked, but garden's a big deal. Okay, guys, again, just thank you for being here. These are just 10 things to consider. We have done a couple of things on martial law in the past. While at times I'm like, that is far-fetched, sometimes I have to look at it and go, you know what? If things ratchet up, martial law could be the only answer to restore order. It does have its place. It's not like martial law up, but the problem is it can expand into suppression of freedoms in a lot of areas. So with that being said, we really thank Exotac. Again, you get 20% off using Suits20 with the link down below in the description. You should have a fire kit. It should be in your bag. You should have the items you need, not a Bic lighter. Those are great and all, and that's the most convenient way, but you've got to have some more sustainable ways to create fire, and Exotac's one of the best. You get 20% off using Suits20. Also, and really going along the subject we're talking about, is the Modern Survival Manual for the Upcoming Economic Collapse. Argentina's 2001 absolute collapse, and they had multiples after that. Thank goodness they're doing a lot better now with Milei in the office. But this is a great book, and you can get a link down below in the description. And check out suitsgear.com. Again, we've got a brand new patch. This is actually a larger, this was a prototype patch. It's just a touch smaller than this. And we have hats and shirts, and we have deals like you wouldn't believe, prepping and firearms. And we have a monthly newsletter where we send out and giveaways every month. So got a lot going on over at suitsgear.com. And it's something we have just started revamping. And so check that out. Also, a big thanks to Sarah Mack for being over the computer and monitoring questions. And guys, just make sure that you continue to prep. If you're not a prepper, if you haven't done it, you need to at least put some things back. Give yourself some time, because here's the thing about prepping. You don't have to be a doomsday prepper. You don't have to have items stocked to the ceiling. But whatever you have prepped is going to buy you time to make more rational decisions. And it's just smart to do. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.